It was late when I finally arrived home that night. The city was cloaked in a thin veil of rain, the kind that didn't drench you but left a chill lingering on your skin. Streetlights flickered occasionally, their glow distorted by the glistening puddles on the pavement. Normally, I found such nights peaceful, even soothing. But not that night. Something felt wrong. As I pushed open my front door, the usual warmth of my apartment was conspicuously absent. Instead, a cold draft greeted me, carrying with it an inexplicable sense of foreboding. The air smelled faintly metallic, a detail I would have dismissed if not for the strange unease growing in my chest. I shook it off as exhaustion, slipped off my damp shoes, and hung my coat by the door. The silence in the apartment was deafening. It wasn't the tranquil silence I was used to after a long day. This silence felt alive, watchful. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet seemed magnified, each step echoing far longer than it should. I tried to push the feeling aside, heading to the kitchen to prepare a cup of tea. The kitchen felt colder than the rest of the apartment, almost as if a window had been left open, though they were all securely shut. My fingers trembled slightly as I filled the kettle and placed it on the stove. The soft hiss of water boiling was oddly comforting, grounding me in the ordinary. With my tea in hand, I moved to the living room, determined to shake off the irrational fear creeping over me. I sank into my favorite chair, its worn leather creaking beneath me, and reached for the book I'd been reading. A thriller about a detective solving an impossible case. How ironic. But tonight, the words blurred together on the page, my mind distracted by the weight of the silence pressing against my ears. Then, I heard it. A faint sound. So faint that at first I thought I had imagined it. A soft rustling, like fabric brushing against fabric, coming from the direction of the kitchen. My breath hitched. I sat frozen, straining to listen. It came again, this time accompanied by the faintest tap, as though someone had dropped something light and hollow onto the tiled floor. I stood slowly, my legs feeling heavier than they should, and walked toward the kitchen. The hallway stretched longer than usual, or maybe it just felt that way. When I reached the doorway, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the light switch. Taking a deep breath, I flicked it on. The fluorescent bulb buzzed to life, flooding the room with harsh light. Everything looked normal. The counters were clean, the sink empty. But then I saw it. Small puddles of water leading from the sink to the center of the room. I crouched down to inspect them, but there was no trail leading back. Just a few isolated drops, glistening under the light. A shiver ran down my spine. I wiped the floor with a kitchen towel, dismissing it as condensation, and returned to the living room. But as I settled back into my chair, I couldn't shake the unease. My eyes darted toward the darkened hallway, half expecting to see a shadow moving at its end. I tried to focus on my book, but my heart raced with each passing second. And then, I heard it again. A whisper, barely audible, but unmistakable. It wasn't the rustling of wind or the groan of the old pipes. This was deliberate. Words, though I couldn't make out what they were, spoken in a voice that was neither male nor female but chillingly hollow. The sound came from the back room, the guest room I rarely used. My pulse quickened as I approached the door, now slightly ajar. I couldn't remember leaving it open. The darkness beyond the door felt alive, as though it were breathing. I reached for the light switch, and when the bulb flickered on, the room revealed itself to be empty. But the air was thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. I backed out of the room, shutting the door firmly behind me, and returned to the living room. My hands trembled as I reached for my tea, now lukewarm. I had barely taken a sip when the television flickered on by itself. Static filled the screen, the crackling sound sharp in the otherwise silent room. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the remote and turned it off, but the screen blinked back to life almost immediately. This time, the static began to shift. Shapes moved within the screen, twisting and forming into what looked like a figure, a shadowy silhouette. My breath caught in my throat as I stared, unable to look away. Yanking the power cord from the wall, I thought I had put an end to it. But the sense of relief was short-lived. Behind me, I felt it. A presence. Cold air brushed against the back of my neck, unmistakably human-like in its closeness. My entire body stiffened. Slowly, I turned around, expecting I don't know what. There was nothing there. But on the coffee table, where there had been nothing moments ago, lay a piece of paper. My hands shook as I picked it up. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges, and scrawled across it in jagged, uneven letters were the words, "Find me." I dropped the paper and stumbled back. My mind raced. Someone had to be in the apartment. I searched for my phone to call the police, but the screen was black. It wouldn't turn on. I ran to the front door, but the lock wouldn't budge. The keys, which I always kept in the dish by the door, were gone. Panic set in. I ran to the windows, but every single one was locked tight. No matter how hard I tried, they wouldn't open. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing through the apartment. "You can't escape," they said, the words hissing like steam. The shadows on the walls began to move, twisting into unnatural shapes that defied logic. I retreated to a corner of the living room, my knees pulled to my chest, my eyes squeezed shut. The whispers grew louder, the shadows darker. The air grew so cold that I could see my breath in front of me. I prayed for morning to come, for the nightmare to end. When the first light of dawn finally broke through the windows, the whispers stopped. The shadows disappeared. Everything was still again, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I grabbed my coat and fled the apartment, leaving everything behind. To this day, I don't know what I experienced that night, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear the faintest whisper, "Find me."